Our session is about collaboration between startups and corporates. For those who yeah, did you? Thank you for being on time. Please come closer. You're happy? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our session about collaboration opportunities between startups and corporates. My name is Pakiza Abdurrahman. I'm from the Economic Development Board. Delighted to be here with you today, and with us on the panel are my colleagues Ryan Sharif, Managing Director of Flat 6 Labs Bahrain, Sarah Schwab, CEO and founder of the Experience Accelerator, and Mr. Lawrence Morgan, the Managing Director of Nest. Thank you very much for being with us. And if I may start by the panelists giving us an introduction about themselves and about the programs they run.
Sure. So first of all, thank you very much for having us on this panel today. My name is Ryan Sharif. I'm the Managing Director of Flat 6 Labs Bahrain. We are the largest seed stage financier and accelerator program in the MENA region. We have 6 offices across the MENA, and we've most recently just opened a presence in the Kingdom of Bahrain. We've invested in 16 companies and 200 portfolio companies throughout all of our locations.
Good morning, everyone. Sarah Schwab is my name, founder and CEO of the Experience Accelerator. So I have about 20 years' experience in the field of management and leadership development. I am super passionate about great leaders and managers, and we have an innovative solution to help improve the quality of managerial behavior in mid to large-sized companies. I was lucky enough to be part of the first cohort of Flat 6 Labs. We're headquartered here in Bahrain and have an office in Europe, in Switzerland as well. Delighted to be here. And I have a lot of experience about working in collaborative relationships with corporates.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Frankly, I know you've got an awful lot of different sessions that you can be attending. I really appreciate the fact that you've chosen to come to this one. To me, the most important element is that we make this most informative, but also relevant to what you actually want to get out of a session. So from our perspective, I think we've got a broad array of representatives from kind of the startup side, the corporate side, and the government side in terms of our experience throughout kind of Asia, Middle East, and Africa. I do want you to kind of have it as an interactive session. Please do feel free to kind of speak out and question. I do think this is an opportunity for you to really get in and dig deep in terms of our experience helping startups get traction with large multinationals, as well as a kind of a government agenda around the Middle East. So I really do encourage it to be as fruitful as possible in an interactive way.
Amazing. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you, Lawrence.
By the way, I'm just Lawrence. I'm CEO of Nest. We are the largest operator of corporate accelerators in Asia. We have a geography of Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. Basically, I've built up and sold 3 of my own businesses. Very much the foundation of Nest is how do we help B2B startups get as much traction as possible in selling in their services to large multinationals. And we're very much focused on commercial success. So that can take a range of formats. That can be a vendor relationship, selling their startup services into the corporate. It can be a joint venture, white label. It can be anything around an investment side, CVC and bits that we can talk about if that's of interest. But very much focusing on commercial traction, which I think is a key theme of what we all do here on the panel.
Great. I'll move to Sarah. Sarah, if you can share with us your experience on how can startups demonstrate real leadership traits within the dynamics of a relationship with a corporate?
That's a great question. I think there's maybe 2 or 3 things that I would share. The first and most important is, have you identified the problem that the corporate is experiencing? So we may have a perfectly formed solution to a problem that we've identified, but have we validated that with our corporate colleagues? And oftentimes it isn't quite what we seem. And so you really need to find someone who's as motivated as you are to solve that specific problem for the corporate. I think that's number one. Number two, I was speaking with a learning executive from Mondelez, global company. She's in the learning space, and she told me two things last week. She said, Sarah, you have no idea how many offers I get every single day from companies like yours, number one. And number two, you have to realize how difficult it is to get stuff done in a large global corporate. So I think that there's something around really making yourself differentiated and adding value to each conversation that you have with your corporate customer that makes you stand apart. And then I think the third thing is around complexity. Know thy customer. In mid to large size corporates like I work with, on average, maybe 5 to 6 stakeholders on a small deal that have a say in whether they're going to buy our services. And so, in my world, that's HR, learning, IT, and procurement. So right there, 4 people. And sort of understanding how to navigate that decision-making process, for me, is one of the secrets to success of a great collaboration with a corporate.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think exactly what she's just said at the end there is understanding and be empathetic to the challenges within corporates of decision making and the time frames associated with that, and putting yourself on their side. We're here to how can I help make buying my service as easy as possible, and being aware that it's not straightforward and there isn't a single decision maker, and getting that ambassador, I think, is absolutely key.
Is it a top-down decision-making process, or how does it work? How does the dynamics work between a startup and a large corporate?
Mm-hmm. So I think it differs. My experience here in the Gulf is it's really helpful to be introduced at the CEO level and then passed down. But ultimately, the decision does tend to lie in the HR, in my case, in the HR functional line responsibility. There's very few CEOs who sort of mandate stuff nowadays. And so that's my experience of the best conversations are where you get a nice high-level introduction, sort of, you've got to meet with Sarah, and then you obviously got to prove your worth when you're with the real decision makers who are slightly lower down in the organization.
We always go around this notion of middle management are really our biggest enemy. Do you sort of agree to that, or
I do.
notice that?
I often quote it. I think, if you think about engaging innovation, when I was first doing this and pitching this to CEOs 10 years ago, you really needed to sell in the idea that they needed to be engaging innovation at all. They think I'm in a leadership position, I'm in a perfectly strong position. Now you've seen enough examples of the Kodaks and the Blockbusters go through. We are in an era of constant innovation. And the only way in which you can survive and thrive in this era is if you are looking at what's going on out there that might come along, one idle Tuesday and blindside you. And without you are constantly engaging in the external world of what's going out there's always somebody building something bigger, faster, cheaper, leaner. How do you actually engage with that? To say, certainly in our base in Asia, to say the average CEO is 60 plus is a generous, perhaps. They are so removed oftentimes from what actually is going on at the grassroots level. Oh, if they ever become big, that startup, we'll buy them. No, they'll buy you. The pace at which they are growing and your lack of awareness until they are really much more developed, and the scale at which they can both raise funds and grow with their digital business model is a big threat. So that was very much the era a few years ago. I think now every CEO knows they need to be doing something. The question is, what should they be doing? They need to engage innovation, and it is a partnership. They need the innovation that is being created outside. You can't be building it all internally. We're in a buy versus build era. And then I think the people kind of on the ground who are going to be deploying the innovation technology, they see the benefit of it. They see that can make my life easier. It can see I can process more things. They can see how I can streamline it. And it's the middle management that I think feel threatened. They have their fiefdom. They've always been doing it this way. and they look at something coming along as new as being imposed on them by above. You're telling me to do what and engage with this guy. How is that going to affect my compensation? And is it going to threaten my job? Is it going to make my job redundant, for example? Yeah. So I do feel like the top-down approach is useful, but then when it gets to that middle management, how do you make them ambassadors of your product and wanting to adopt it is actually a big challenge.
And here I'd like to ask Ryan, on your perspective, on the role of accelerators and incubators to bridge and build that synergy between corporates and between startups.
Yeah, so we spend a lot of time with each of the startups that we take in within each cohort in terms of bridging that relationship with the corporate. The idea is to try and get them ready to a certain extent to actually be able to manage the actual meeting, first of all. So there's a lot of startups that might have the technical competency to actually drive the technology, but to actually work the meeting room is another skill in itself. So, we really try and work with them in order to be presentable and to actually, as Sarah rightly touched on, fit the need of that corporate. If you're going in, selling oranges and they want pears, there's no point in having that conversation. So the idea is to really try and diagnose exactly what they're looking for and to try and find your niche within that. As an accelerator, we're staffed with people who have excellent connections in all the different corporates within our ecosystem, and then the idea is to try and bridge them into that corporate. What we have found as well is sometimes it's not always the best thing to go and to knock on a CEO's door at that level. We try and find champions within each organization, which is taking the startup role. And then we try and use that as a platform to bridge up to the CEO level to actually accept some of the technologies that we're bringing into their corporate.
And Flat Six Labs being a regional accelerator with experience in different countries in the MENA region, what do you feel the real appetite of corporates to build relationships and connect with startups?
So it really depends on each country and it depends on the company itself. We find with some of the larger companies, they actually have their own VC vehicle, which enables them to fully understand exactly the value of working with startups, onboarding them, investing in them. So that we see the likes of, for example, Agility trying to lead on some of these initiatives and some of the larger corporates. And what we try to do as well is to use our regional network in order to build bridges across the MENA region. As Sarah rightly said, there's a big sort of part of Middle Eastern culture, which is that face-to-face relationship and meeting a very high-level person in order to win that first job. And it's our job as well as the accelerator to be able to provide those introductions and to try and accelerate the companies into landing their first or second or third corporate client.
Mm-hmm. And Lawrence, is the culture the same in Asia?
I think, our foundation and roots, we're headquartered in Hong Kong. So we've actually been doing corporate innovation nearly a decade in Asia and only more recently in kind of Middle East. I think there are a lot of similar traits. I think there is the shared kind of fear of failure, which is kind of endemic in the culture. I think there is also how do we get entrepreneurship, and we need, frankly, in the MENA region, more founders to go out and create startups to really get that critical mass. And I think there's an element that kind of, I haven't spent this money on your education to my children for you to then go and waste it on some meaningless startup career. It's a bit like the fourth year of a degree. We're going to, you can go and play around that, but then you're going to get a real job because I wanted you to become a doctor or something that I didn't become. I think the reality is, how do we make that a career path? And we need case studies. We need role models where startups have really pioneered that. I think from an Asia perspective, there are now a lot of examples of that have grown into large companies, obviously China and the Tencents and the Alibabas. I think from a Middle East perspective, culture-wise, it's a work in progress, frankly. I think entrepreneurship and actually the role that a lot of government and corporates are doing is trying to make the pathway of entrepreneurship more appealing. I think corporates themselves have got to get more entrepreneurial because otherwise it's frankly a brain drain and they're going to lose talent if they aren't more nimble. But I think it's a work in progress from Middle East perspective. We are seeing, as kind of Ryan alludes to, the start of, say, CVC, so corporate venture capital, is just at its infancy here in the Middle East. It's a little bit further along in Asia, but that's about getting into the right mindset for people to be engaging meaningfully with startup technologies and seeing the benefit of it. So I think we're a little bit further behind, perhaps.
Yeah, and maybe I can just bring the European view. Last week, it was interesting. There's this concept of scouts who act on behalf of large companies who have already identified specific problems they want startups to solve and are prepared to give some equity-free funding to work on a pilot with those organizations. So I got contacted by Deutsche Bahn last week and Telefonica. And so I think it's an interesting solution to two big problems that startups face with approaching corporates to start with, which is you don't have the right entry and they don't necessarily understand that you need a little bit of money in order to do what they want. So I'm sure it happens all over the world, but it was just striking to me 2 in 1 week from Europe.
Mm-hmm. Moving from the synergies and collaborations between startups and corporates, and maybe just touching on the opportunities for governments to collaborate with startups, what are the opportunities there? What are the values, in your opinion, for startups to work closely with governments, to have a B2G model? What are your thoughts on that?
So here in the Kingdom of Bahrain, I know that the SME Authority now have worked with the tender board in order to make sure that SMEs, I think it's 30%?
20%.
20% of all government tenders are given to SMEs. So I think that's a real sort of push forward to try and fight the corner for these SMEs and for them to engage in government tenders. Another thing that we're working on as accelerators as well is to really educate the government entities of what acceleration is and how it works and thought leadership. And what we try and do is work with them in terms of trying to do hackathons in order for them to actually see exactly how the process works. And then once they're sort of bought into the fact of what we're doing, then we can start introducing some of the companies that we've actually invested in and try and diagnose problems within each of the government entities and try and find a solution. I know one thing that's actually worked very well in Dubai, you have an entity called Dubai Future Foundation, and what they've managed to do is actually allocate government money for the startup scene, where they would diagnose a problem, and then you'd have 2 or 3 startups actually come together, provide a solution, and then win a big government contract on the back end of that. And I think that's something which is worth replicating here in Bahrain.
Amazing. Thank you so
much. Let's be rightly understood. I've built too many businesses to not know this. Cash flow kills companies, not profitability, right? My biggest warning to startups in a B2G model is timing of payment. Yeah. And I think governments are generally slow payers. And I think I would just caution any startup with a B2G model, you need to have the cash flow capability to get through that cycle, because if not, you're simply not going to be here. I do think there are a lot of opportunities. I think you've got to be at a scale where you can actually move the needle in the government contract. Sometimes a very early stage startups simply aren't in a position to be able to operate or deliver at that level. And that's where, as I think Ryan says, maybe it's a collaboration of different startups which together can actually meaningfully solve a problem. I do like the idea of government as customer. I think it's very much the role of governments in, certainly the markets we operate in, Asia, Middle East and Africa. They are totally different to Europe and the States. This is not an environment where it is grassroots R&D, private sector innovation driving an economy. It simply isn't. It's farcical. This is very much a government-driven, trying to drive the private sector into modernizing and adopting, world-class technologies and really trying to get that agenda going. So with that in mind, how can the government position itself, and whether that's policy, whether that is creating the right platform to enable startups to be part of modernizing the economy, digital transformation, innovation, all the kind of buzzwords that people are talking about. How can government position itself appropriately to help incentivize, and I mean incentivize, not subsidize, the private sector to get involved, because we need the private sector to be involved. This is the only way it's sustainable. Otherwise, we've known too much from Asian examples, subsidy goes away, so does your ecosystem. How do we make this sustainable, I think, is key.
Amazing point. Thank you so much, Lawrence. I'd like to turn to the audience and see if anyone would like to ask any question. Sure. Do we have a mic? To the gentleman over here. Please state your name, your background, and the question.
All right. My name is Luay. I am an entrepreneur here in Bahrain. I'm specialized in education, online education. I educate people languages. I speak 5 languages. And I educate people languages online.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you is that would you recommend an entrepreneur or a startup to go directly to the government or to the accelerators right away, or just wait for some time to make it work and then do the calculations, and this is my cost and this is what I need for funding, and this is how it works? Because some people say you just have to go right away, and some others, which I tend to, they say just give it some time, do your calculations and then go. What is your best approach in your opinion?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So I've done 2 accelerators, one in Switzerland and one here in Bahrain. The first accelerator I did, I really wasn't ready. We had a working product, but it was held together with sticky tape. And so I don't think we really got the full benefit out of that Swiss acceleration experience. The other thing I would say is it's really helpful when you're talking to people like my friend Ryan, if you've got evidence of product market fit, that you've got people, even if they've given you feedback based on a wire diagram, so you have no tech whatsoever, getting that market testing and problem identification that I was talking about established, at least with a few small core of your potential customer base, would be sort of the stage where I would advocate is the right place to start. If you've got a working minimum viable product, from my perspective, that's the time to go into an acceleration program. But Ryan, you may have a different view.
No, I totally agree. I mean, we worked on this while you were with us in the first cohort, and we did a lot of product testing, and we brought the corporates in, and we got a better understanding of exactly what they wanted from the testing that you did. And then once it's ready to go, you're able to go, first of all, work on a more freemium model where you actually allow them to test it free of charge, and then once they start liking the product, then you can start charging for it.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to be very understanding of the corporate's needs as well. You know, if it doesn't fit and you're charging them a good amount of money for it, they won't go with you again. So you really got to try and tailor your product to fit each consumer that you're reaching out to.
And I had a couple of customers already before I got to Flat 6, and I can tell you they were grilled by these guys before they even accepted me. So it was good to have that in my bag, I would say.
Yeah. In every ecosystem, you've got, for different stages where you're at as an entrepreneur, you've got players or stakeholders that could help you. So to prepare you for an accelerator, I believe that would be the role of an incubator, a business incubator that you can maybe sign up to for a year or two. Prepare yourself to be able to join an accelerator model.
Yeah, I think it depends what level you're at. I think, as Pakisi says, a lot of people say, oh, incubator, accelerator, and they use the words kind of interchangeably. I definitely think, as it's kind of solidifying, incubator is earlier stage. So you can go to an incubator with an idea or ideation stage, and they will help you find team members, mentors, advisors, that product market fit for you to kind of ideate around so that you can hone in on exactly the solution that you're creating. I think what Flat 6 and Nest do is later stage acceleration. Often the companies and startups that come to us have got some validation, i.e. paying customers, and thereafter opportunities to do 2 things. One is meet more customers. So how can you, with your network, as Ryan says from Flat 6 is absolutely unequaled across the MENA region, leverage their network to introduce to new customers, and that will shorten your sales cycle, which is a big challenge for a lot of these startups, but also scale to new markets. And let's be rightly understood, if it's Asia or MENA, you cannot look at them as single market opportunities. They all have nuances, cultures, languages, and regulations. I think especially something like a Flat Six and Nest that operate across many different markets, we can help you with that new market entry. But that's very much what we would call growth stage startups. I've got a couple of paying customers, I'm wanting more customers, and I'm wanting to grow.
Amazing. Thank you. I have a question? Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Victoria. We are from Mass Business Incubator, okay? And actually we lack, here in Bahrain specifically, we lack a little bit of understanding the difference between the incubators and accelerators. And Lawrence, we have met last time in MYC at the meeting. We had this huge trouble, okay, dividing the job, like what incubator does and what accelerator does, okay? So all of you, you come from different countries with different experiences. So maybe you can just give us a couple of points in your countries, in your cultures, what incubator is supposed to give the startup, okay? The incubator. Thank you.
Incubator specifically.
Incubator specifically.
Great.
Yeah,
Sure.
Thank you.
I believe Nest, Lawrence put some thoughts around it earlier by saying that an incubator serves and supports early stage startups by giving them mentorship, access to networking opportunities with corporates.
Yeah, I think, to me, differentiation is accelerators are mainly post-revenue, or you've honed that product, you're looking for customers, and you have a value proposition. As I always say, two things. It's very rare, it's very rare to meet incredibly bright people with incredibly dumb ideas. It happens in tech all day long. Why? These people have solved a problem. Oh, it's really difficult, and I've solved a problem. But is anybody willing to pay for it? Is it a product? Don't fall in love with your solution. Fall in love with the problem that you're trying to solve. Mm-hmm. And I think you really need to think about that. We are in an era, because everyone's it's all a sex industry of entrepreneurs and startups. There are far too many solutions looking for problems. I think what incubators can very much help with is, what is that problem set? What exactly are you solving, and who would be that customer? And then, as Pikir has outlined, the mentorship. How do you build your team? I'm a team of one. It's the most difficult size of team you can possibly have. You're juggling 25 hats. How can we introduce you as an incubator to different players to build that team? And it's probably on a pro bono basis at the beginning. Equally, mentorship. Who's built a similar business? If it's in education, introduce to Sarah, who can help you, given that she's done 2 businesses before, to advise you. And then I think it's resources, be that resources from financial, I'm raising a seed round or pre-seed or whatever that might be, or angel, and also kind of non-financial resources. I think that's very much what I would see as incubator.
Sure. I think one more thing I want to add to that is, not everybody deserves to be accelerated. Some people are not good enough to be accelerated. So for example, when we scout, we have 350 applications. We only end up investing in 7 of the companies, and those are the 7 companies that get accelerated. So it's just a natural progression in a chain of investment, basically. We're the first early stage investor, and then we're looking to the angels to give the follow-on, and then after that we look to the VCs. So it's, the incubating space is just earlier in the chain.
And provides more of an ecosystem of a safe net for individuals with ideas to validate their ideas, to cross-reference them with like-minded people. And I believe much of the incubators run events, invite corporates and other different stakeholders, whether they're university students, policymakers, to come and meet with those individuals to look for synergies and look for collaboration over a longer period of time of up to 2 years. The accelerator is more of a program-driven, shorter time span, and more focused on a one-to-one relationship with the companies that they accelerate. Any other questions from the audience? Yes. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Kamiti. I'm based in Bahrain. I'm calling myself a waste entrepreneur because I'm dealing with AI technology for waste management in buildings. And actually, I have a question. We have the incubator, then the next step is the accelerator. Then what would be the next step? You leave the kids literally when they are 18 and run around and do it by yourself, or is there another step which comes after the accelerator, so to preserve actually the business and to have a continuity growth?
I think, from my perspective, accelerators actually span a wide range.
Yeah.
We are towards the later stage of accelerators. We're in the rapid growth phase. You know, to give you a quote, you know, I just finished a program with Bangkok Bank. It's Southeast Asia's largest commercial bank. You know, one of the startups said, "Oh, we're really interested in coming to Thailand. It will be the 121st country we've opened in." You know, and others raised several hundred million, got several hundred staff. So there's a huge range of size of startups. I think one thing to note very much, what we want to cultivate as Flat 6 and Nest is very much a family and an alumni. It's not at the end of that program that suddenly, yeah, thanks very much, goodbye, you know, off. It's then, how can we help you in other ways? If it's been successful with this corporate in this specific program, how can I introduce you to more corporates? From Flat 6's perspective, I think, from an investment perspective, when you're going to invest in them, you've got a vested interest in helping them succeed on an ongoing basis. Yeah. So I don't think it's a definitive end often, and I think, frankly, any accelerator that would look to limit that relationship after the program doesn't get it. So I do think it's an ongoing relationship. I would say after that growth phase, what a lot of people then look to is strategic investors. So when they're Series B, C onwards, how can they get on board smart capital, as they call it, that can actually bring more than just investors to the table, so that the investor can then open up new doors through their network and add, you know, senior level brain power. That was how I would say it.
Yeah, I think for us with Flat 6, one of the good things is that we're actually invested in the company. So it's actually in our best interest to see them succeed. And what we try to run is after the cohort is graduated, we try to work with them to try and give them the more follow-on funding opportunities and try and link them with our investor network and try and strengthen that relationship. So it's constantly ongoing. It's you know, we're vested in the company, we're an owner, we're a shareholder in the company. So it's going to be a long relationship until we exit.
I'll also add that here in Bahrain this year, part of the SME Development Board's initiative was to launch an Export Bahrain entity that's available in the Chamber of Commerce on the 15th floor. It helps any local business set up in Bahrain to expand globally in different markets, provide you with training, with connections, with opportunities to scale up your business beyond the borders of Bahrain. With our commitment of Bahrain being the gateway for the Gulf, that agency is there to help you do so. So if you'd like any more information, I'm more than happy to share them with you after the panel.
Can I ask about, if we've got time, as an audience, who do you represent? Are you a government and setting policy around startups? You know, corporates wanting to know how to, you know, really get the right policies in place for you to be welcoming innovation? I'm very interested, as a show of hands.
Or are you entrepreneurs? So
yeah, are you
yeah, 1, 2, 3.
So who's an entrepreneur? If you put your hand up. Not so many. Okay. About a tenth. Who represents kind of corporates? Again, another handful. And the rest are government-oriented, looking to... And is this... So if the majority are government, are there some questions from that government side? Is it what's best practice policy? I think both from Flat 6 perspective and Nest, we are intimately involved in best-in-class policy. We operate in multiple jurisdictions, and there's lots of things that people have done very wrong and have distorted what I would see as the free-flowing private sector economics of a capitalist economy. And there are other things that really promote it. Are there some questions from government representatives around spurring kind of a startup economy? Not to put you on the spot, but put you on the spot.
I can ask you something.
Yes.
So, because of, so as Ryan mentioned earlier, that in 2016, Bahrain has launched the decree for corporates and government to actually procure from SMEs. So 20% of government procurement is mandated to be given to SMEs. As a decree, it's there, but what do you feel the best implementation project or an implementation sort of journey would be. Because, I mean, having a policy is one thing, being practical about implementing it and actually connecting startups with tender board is another different journey. So in your perspective, what is the role of government to prepare startups to bid for government contracts? Any best practices, any kind of thoughts around that? How could government prepare the SMEs to sell to government, sorry?
Has anybody representing the government had experience of that, where there is an agenda around engaging SMEs and startups, and they're not the same, but SMEs and startups in government contracts from countries that you represent? You're a tough audience, dude. What do you think, Ryan? In terms of, this 20% that has to be allocated, do you think it's going to be a success? Do you think it's forced?
Can we have the mic? Just a moment.
So normally what happens when the big projects going to the tender board, and then we have, for instance, in Oman, we have a 10%, not 20%, okay? And then normally the corporate will win the contract, okay? And tender board will ask the corporate, okay, to give 10% of that amount to the SMEs.
Yeah.
Okay, but there is no monitoring system between the tender board and the SMEs, and this is the gap.
Monitoring in terms of how many were awarded, what is the value of the...
Both,
Okay.
the volume and the projects. And sometimes the corporate itself, there's some ethical things going on as well. They will create their own SMEs.
Subsidiaries. Yeah.
I think sometimes as well it's to do with the tender size. So in Bahrain, anything that goes to tender board has to be 25,000 dinars and above, from my understanding. So even to pay for the bond for that for some of the SMEs is not realistic. And maybe the size of the job might be too big for them as well. So there's a number of teething problems which I think tender board need to also address and look into, of how to really engage with the SMEs and which SMEs are the right ones to actually bid for each tender as well. We don't want a flood of people bidding when there's no relevance as well.
Yeah, I'd maybe just go back to this collaboration point, Pakiza, because in the UK, I've participated in several tenders where we're encouraged to enter a consortia with other small companies. Yeah. And that's not easy for many founders or CEOs to accept. But if you can get over that mindset barrier, actually the collaboration and value added that you get from those conversations, whether or not you win the tender, is truly valuable. And so I think there's a little bit of a mindset of suppressing our own agenda, suppressing our potentially own ego, to look at consortia as a way of accessing. And I think the other thing is simplification. So I would look to the US, who have done a lot of this type of support for minority, women-owned, small enterprises and so on. I bet they have a lot of lessons learned for us, what to do and what not to do.
Thank you so much. I think with that point on collaboration between startups is a beautiful statement to end our panel today. Collaboration is king. It's the only way forward for sustainable economic development in any economy. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for being with us here. Thank you for the panelists, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day.